story of my summer vacations and spring vacation and winter vacation for the last 19 years in Siberia. Somewhat different. When I usually speak or write on Buddhism in Russia, the subject concerns the pre-Soviet past. The paper is filled with efforts to establish the founding dates of Buddhist monasteries, or numbers of Buddhists listed on census materials, or the role of important Buddhists in international affairs in the 19th and 20th century. This conference to me is a wonderful gift, a place which allows me to talk about the ever-evolving role of Buddhism in Siberia today. First, since this is not a conference for Siberianists, I'll quickly locate my story for you geographically and religiously. Yellow Hat Mahayana Buddhism, followers of the Dalai Lama, have been in the lands on both sides of Lake Baikal, just north of Mongolia, for 300 years. Originally, the adherents were Buryat Mongols with ethnic, cultural, and economic ties to the Mongols to their south. By the beginning of the 20th century, at the time of World War I, the vast majority of the Buryats in the Transbaikal, or east of the lake, practiced Buddhism, while only a small number of Buryats on the Cisbaikal, or west side of the lake, were Buddhists. Unlike the spread of Buddhism in the Transbaikal, the spread of Buddhism in the Cisbaikal had been opposed at the beginnings by the Imperial Russian government, which explains the low numbers of Buryat Buddhists prior to the Russian Revolution. By the early 20th century, Buddhism had become a part of Transbaikal Buryat identity, and although the numbers were small in the Cisbaikal, Buddhism is still associated with their ethnicity. Under the Soviets, Buddhism was suppressed, much like the other religions of the Soviet Union, including a variety of forms of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. During the interwar period, numerous Buddhist monasteries were destroyed or used for storage. Lamas were killed and Buddhist relics were destroyed, and some were hidden. In the Soviet era, in an attempt to control and watch religious groups, the Buddhists received a new headquarters because the Tsarist era headquarters was too far from any Soviet political center. Just outside of Ulan-Ude, the capital of the Buryat region and headquarters of Soviet power and non-Buryat population of the region, the Ilgoginsk Datsan was opened in 1945. This location, close to Soviet administration and Great Russians, provided opportunities for greater control over even though the government-chosen lamas, should they decide to deviate from party directives. Following the failed coup 20 years ago this week, the drive to regain Buddhist identity and property began in earnest. To do this, monasteries and lamas would have to be recreated. So much time had elapsed, however, that much had been lost. One story will clarify the situation immediately following the creation of the Russian Republic. I was in Irkutsk in the Cisbaikal in the spring of 1993. As a historian, I wanted to see the seat of Buryat Buddhism and the head of Buddhism, the Bandido Lama. According to the documents from Imperial Russia, this headquarters at Gusino Ozera, Goose Lake, Tamchinsky Datsan, was close to the Mongolian border and some distance south of Ulan-Ude. I asked a number of great Russians connected to the university in Irkutsk if the monastery was still standing, and if so, how to get to Gusino Ozera. They all said that I was mistaken, that the town of Gusino Ozersk, you notice it's a different word, had no Buddhist structures, and it was a power plant village. One Russian, however, took me to visit a Buryat friend in Ulan-Ude. I took her for Ulan-Ude, the capital of Buryatia. There, among Buryats and Russians, I feared that the memory of the Datsan of Gusino Ozero was lost. Finally, I was taken to meet a Buryat artist, and we all stood around talking for a certain length of time before he finally said, "The American's right." Interestingly, younger Buryats in the room were surprised by this information. That was what was so striking to me. Obviously, much information on this core element of Buryat identity had been kept from many of the younger generations. An expedition was initiated, and we traveled to the former headquarters of Buddhism in the Russian Empire in Alata. At that that time, after decades of neglect, a handful of llamas had just begun to fix up 2 nearly derelict buildings. While this find was of enormous interest to me as a historian, it was clear that the Boreats saw the renewal of these buildings served as labors of love and an opportunity to regain their heritage. Unfortunately, due to a fire in the late 1990s, the rebuilding efforts have been slowed. The trip down there, which was very interesting all the way around, yes, Bucina Ozerks does exist. It's on the other side of the lake. The older village is still there, and what had been done since the end of the Tsarist era was that the Soviets had just built houses all the way around in concentric circles around the monastery, and it was like going through a maze, a corn maze, to finally get into the monastery. And meanwhile, what had been done to the town, the little village, was it was used for military storage. And what the fire did was set off the arsenal in the village, and rockets went off, and the monastery was hit by a rocket. As mostly it was homes that were damaged. So the name of the Datsan itself is Tamchinsky. One problem that it faces even after rebuilding is that it's still an isolated place, even for modern transportation. You have to, I'm going back in May. I'm sure probably the dirt road has finally been replaced, but it is still pretty distant. It was built to serve a nomadic 18th century culture, and it was a wonderful place for the population when it was built. Therefore, despite its connection to the Soviet era, Ivolginsky, the new one built by the Soviets, remains the headquarters for Buddhism and the home for the new Bandido Humble Lama. This is the man who heads all Buddhism in Russia. Well, what about this Ivolginsky Datsan? Well, since the fall of the Soviet Union, Ivolginsky Datsan has blossomed. 2 important elements make the new monastery an acceptable heir to the older monastery, despite its connection to the Soviet Union. First, the location of the Datsan, so close to the new Buryat Republic capital, with a wide range of transportation, has made it more accessible, as Ulan-Ude has good roads, rail, the Trans-Siberian Railroad, and an airport. This allows not only Buryats, but people from around the world, including dignitaries, ease of access. A number of visits of important people have been chronicled, and this is in the last 15 years, and this has been seen as a point of pride, an ability to show people from the outside Buddhism and Buryat culture, and you notice I'm mixing the two. And second, Ivolginsky has recently become more holy to believers. The 12th Bandido Humble Lama, Dashi Dojo Itielgov, was the final Bandido Humble Lama chosen prior to the Soviet era, and he died in 1927. He had prophesied that his body would not deteriorate, and he was buried in secret because it was the 1920s, and he said, find out how things are going in 30 years. So in 1957, his still uncorrupted body was dug up and then hidden again because it was the 1950s. But the point had been made. His prophecy was correct. This was going to be a great Lama, and where he eventually is going to be located, and this is going to be the issue, is going to in itself become a holy place. Think of outside of Moscow in the Russian Orthodox Church. And so this miracle eventually raised an already respected Lama to an already higher respect among the Buryats themselves. Of course, there's a small group that know about it until the 1990s. And so in the 1990s, the information becomes public again, gradually, among the Buryats people. The decision is finally made after much discussion and thought and prayer as to when to dig him up and when to move him and where to interment him permanently. And he was exhumed and reburied at Ivolginsk on September 11th, 2002. And I haven't had a chance. I should have asked. I was with the almost a month ago, if it had been postponed for a year, or if September 11th was chosen for a reason, because there is a connection here for the Boreads, and September 11th and connection will be. So at that point, then, this monastery becomes more holy than it had been before, and makes it a very acceptable place. It's now serves proudly as headquarters for the leader of Buddhism and a place to attend services, ceremonies, holidays, train future lamas, and again, provide a place to show the outside world what's necessary. In fact, right now they're encouraging the lamas there to learn English so that they can speak to more foreign visitors and explain Buddhism to a wider range of people. So there's one dark story, but that deserves another discussion. Despite Russian government interference in the living arrangements at the monastery involving a murder of a lama in the mid-1990s, the monastery has flourished due to great local support. There's actually another interesting manifestation of Buddhism and a desire for more Buddhism in the region. So in addition to the pre-Soviet Mahayana Yellow Hat Buddhism, a new movement has appeared in Irkutsk, again on the Cis-Baikal, where there are far fewer Buryats. The Buryat identification with Buddhism appears especially in the appearance of the Diamond Way Buddhist Center in Irkutsk. Not only is the movement new to the region, the Lama is not Buryat. Whatever controversy surrounding Lama Ole Nidal, he's a Dane, the Buddhist Diamond Way Buddhism Center in Irkutsk is directed by a Buryat, a person who's really there all the time. And if you look at the groups of people there, they are mostly local Buryats, and some of European descent, which would also lead to another discussion. So there is a growing interest there, and I know there's interest in spreading Yellow Hat Mahayana Buddhism more to the Cis-Baikal, and that's being worked on as well. You cannot discuss Yellow Hat Mahayana Buddhism without mentioning the Dalai Lama. And the 14th Dalai Lama has certainly played a role, a conscious role, in revival of Buddhism in the region. He actually was allowed to come in before the end of the Soviet Union, but his early visits in the 1990s played an enormous role. And of course, if you ask any Buryat, say in the summer of 2011, about the Dalai Lama's visits, they can tell you in detail of which villages he went to and such, with great pride. And it did seem that these much heralded visits in 1991 and 1993 were going to herald many more visits. But they have not recently, and this is not the Dalai Lama's fault. It is the Russian government that has discouraged his visits. And I had assumed this was in some ways tied into concern about Buddhist growth or such on Putin's part. And the answer, according to the Buryats, is no, it's China. Moscow's caving in to Chinese pressure concerning the Dalai Lama. And so it's not nothing personal on the part of the government. It's just geopolitics. And on the other hand, if the Dalai Lama is not allowed to arrive, there are any number of visits, I know I've seen some of them, of representatives of the Dalai Lama who come and give teachings, hold audiences with believers and others, anyone wishing to have help with their problems. I went with a friend of mine who is a great Russian and Orthodox Christian who went to see one of the Dalai Lama's advisors. Over divorce. So Buddhism is appearing physically around the region, and the Dalai Lama's role and presence, even if he is not there, is certainly heartfelt. So how do you see more physical manifestations of Buddhism in the region? And the fact is, it's a Buryat Buddhist identity is ever present throughout both urban and rural Buryatia. Ulan-Ude was a drab and soulless town under Soviets. If we had had Google in the 1980s and Googled drab and soulless, Ulan-Ude would have come up. It was just, but after the breakup of the Soviet Union, and it took a while, but it did occur. Today, Buddhist symbols and monuments can be found from the central plaza throughout town. And if you don't know about the central plaza of Ulan-Ude, it boasts the largest head of Lenin in the world, known as the head. And there was some, I was there in the mid-90s, and they were thinking, are we going to get rid of this? And finally the answer was no. They tried to box it up, and that was getting beyond them. And also, you hear from great Russians and Buryats who say, you know, those people back in Russia are crazy. They got rid of all the names, they changed everything. We're not so precipitous in our actions. So it actually was covered for a while. They decided to keep it and have, and there on this plaza, which used to be drab, is now lovely, you have the famous head of Lenin. Not far away is a gate that has been rebuilt, which a very Russian-looking gate, which commemorates the original czarist name for the town, Selengensk, its founding date, with an appropriate double-headed Romanov eagle on the top. Also, Buddhist colors can be found on the buildings, providing much needed lift to older and new buildings. And the colors are bright blues, bright reds, bright yellows, the colors of the interiors and exteriors of a Buddhist monastery. And you see them in the buildings in Ulan-Ude, and it is lovely. In the countryside, you see out on dirt roads or paved roads, they're awash with Buddhist symbols. The prayer flags, rest stops with a place for you to smoke, and seating as well. There are Buddhist symbols there for you to pray, to take a break from your long travels. Out in the villages, Buddhist holidays and dramas as performed by lamas can be seen throughout the seasons. It's hard to put to quantify these beliefs, is it not? And this is obviously just a surface discussion of what has changed, but the physical change in this 20-year period is striking and unmistakable. And talking to people about Buddhism and its importance to their identity and their history, and their happiness that I am talking about the past when going to conferences. A profound change has occurred in Buryatia since the end of the Soviet Union. They have returned to their pre-Soviet faith. We can discuss to what degree this is occurring. That would be another story for me. But the dominant religion has added to all that they are. In many ways, not to the exclusion of any of the past. And more than anything, the Buryats are willing and very eager to talk to about their Buddhist identity. So thank you.